Mike with Tech PB, and we're going to do the Autococker show. This is a show I've been wanting to do for a long time. I mean, after all the death threats I get every single day from the Tipman owners, I'm just really, I think I've got enough security and enough life insurance right now to do an Autococker show. I can't even wait to see the death threats I'm going to get from people now. You didn't sweet spot the reg. Didn't sweet spot the reg. You didn't sweet spot the reg. Okay, whatever. All right, Autocockers. God, I've been shooting Autocockers for years. A lot of myths about the Autocockers. Probably one of the most misunderstood guns in paintball. Unfortunately, I think right now, we're in 2008, about to go into 2009. They stopped making decent Autocockers 5 years ago, okay? The last decent mechanical stock Autococker I think that came out was probably like the 2004 Pro Stock. After that, Wargames products just jumped right off a cliff in terms of their quality. The Trilogy series is a joke. Some of the recent stuff they're coming out with is just awful. I mean, it's just... it's one of the extinct dinosaurs of paintball, and it's unfortunate. I mean, there's other guns that are out there that are more reliable, easier to maintain, easier to take apart, and this, that, and the other. But the Autococker did have its place in time. Still has a very loyal following. It's a fun gun, and the easiest way I can describe is it takes a lot of work for not a lot of performance. A lot of myths surrounding the Autococker. Is it more accurate than other guns? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't see Autocockers as any more accurate than any other gun that's on the market right now. Basically what Autocockers are punt guns that they have attached the pneumatics to the front of it to make it's a pneumatic cocking system attached to a pump gun. It's the easiest way to think of an autococker, and that's why it's called an autococker. It's basically an automatic cocking mechanism attached to a pump gun. This is definitely not a good first time gun. Especially for younger players that don't have the patience to learn. This gun has probably the steepest learning curve in paintball. This is a great gun especially if you're snowed in for the winter and you're just looking for something to screw around. Autococker is going to give you plenty of things to screw around with. A lot of ways you can mess this gun up. A lot of ways you can put this gun out of time. Like I said, I mean, you're dealing with a gun here that not a lot of people, many people have owned, not a lot of people actually use anymore. They're just outdated, and hopefully, I don't know if the company could ever come around, but they're definitely fun guns to have. But in terms of its performance out there on the field, it's down there in the bottom tier. There's going to be people, my Autococker hits people at 200 yards. Well, you know what? I've been to many tournaments. I play them all the time. Very rarely do I see Autocockers out there. I mean, I see them out, in the woods ball, recreational level. People have fun with time with it. I have fun with mine. But let's go on. The first thing I'm going to talk about, there's two big things about Autocockers that you have to understand when you buy the Autococker, and this is the first thing. It has to do with a lot of the frustration that a lot of Autococker owners have when they buy them and they don't understand. The Autococker has a two-part trigger pull. Okay, there's two things that actually happen when you're actually shooting the Autococker and you're actually pulling the trigger, and this is where they talk about Autocockers getting out of time. The gun's not in time. What exactly happens? Okay. When you pull the Autococker trigger, the gun has to operate in this exact sequence. What happens is this is where you start. As the trigger goes back, the first thing that happens is the gun fires, okay? So the hammer goes forward and hits the valve. So as you're pulling the trigger, boom, the gun shoots. Then what happens is the last part of the trigger, the gun cocks and gets ready for the next shot. So let's do that again. The gun, you start pulling the trigger, pow, the gun shoots, then it cocks. Okay? Shoots, then cocks. Let's do it again. It shoots, then it cocks. If your gun does not do this in this order, the gun is going to be out of time and your Autococker will not function. So let's think about that again. As you pull the trigger very slowly, the gun shoots, then the pneumatics, cock the gun, and get it ready for the next shot. It shoots, then cocks. That's the most important thing that we have to talk about when it comes to your gun being in time or being out of time, or, my gun's not in time, it's not shooting right, it's short stroking, all that other stuff. It has to shoot in that order. It has to fire first, then cock. Just like a pump gun. Imagine a pump gun, okay? So as you're holding a pump gun, as you go, you pull the trigger and the gun shoots, then you cock it. It's the exact same sequence with an autococker. So, I'm going to show you here with this autococker that has air in it, and I'm going to zoom in here again, and I'm going to pull the trigger really slowly, and what I want you to keep an eye on is this back piece right here. As I pull the trigger very, very slowly, you're going to see this shoot first, then the gun is going to cock second. So let's go. Okay? Then it cocks. Okay? Let's do that again really slowly. See how far I can zoom in here. There we go. It's probably about as far as I'm going to go. I probably should have worn a white t-shirt. I apologize. But here we go. So I'm going to pull the trigger very slowly and back up just a smidge. Okay, I'm going to pull the trigger very slowly. The gun's going to it's going to fire first, cock second. Okay? It fires first, cocks second. If your gun does not do that, if your autococker does not do that, then your autococker is going to be out of time. Okay? So that's the most important thing with timing an autococker, is that the gun must fire first, cock second. If it doesn't do that in order, then you need to adjust it. Once you do that, the gun shoots great. That's the first thing that happens with autocockers. The next thing, and this is where you start hearing all these autococker owners, start sending you death threats. You didn't sweet spot the reg. You didn't sweet spot the reg. Okay? Oh, Jesus Christ. You didn't sweet spot the reg. Let's talk about what exactly sweet spotting the regulator means. Okay, inside of the autococker, you have a little a poppet. Now, what happens is based on how you set up your gun up, right here is the velocity. Okay, so this is 0, 300 feet per second. Based on how far in you screw in your IVG, which we'll get into that here in a second. The IVG means internal velocity governor. Okay, go figure that one out. But it's basically that big grub screw that adjusts the spring tension in the gun. Based on wherever it's at, this can float. Okay, that you can sweet spot a gun at 200 feet per second. You can sweet spot a gun at 350 feet per second. It really doesn't matter. But let's just assume that the IVG is adjusted perfectly, and the gun will sweet spot at 300 feet per second. Perfect scenario. What happens is as you increase the pressure, your gun will hit a point in which the more you increase the pressure, the velocity will start to go down. What it's going to do is it's going to have a submarine door effect on your poppet. So what's going to happen is the air pressure is going to start pushing so hard against the head of your poppet that as you increase the pressure, the velocity is actually going to go down. And that's very important. I see a lot of autococker owners, they have that issue. They're like, I don't understand. It doesn't matter what, my velocity is all over the place and I keep increasing the pressure. A lot of guns, including Egos, Intimidators, all poppet guns have this sweet spotting effect where once it gets to a point, if you continue to increase the pressure, your velocity will go down. So let's say, for instance, that this autococker sweet spots at 220 psi. So as I increase velocity goes up, 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 up. Once I hit 220 psi, my gun is shooting 300 feet per second. Now, if I increase it to 240 psi, my velocity goes down to 260 feet per second, because what's happening now is the pressure is acting like an air spring. The spring of the poppet is pushing it closed, and now the extra air pressure is pushing it closed. Now, if I'm over here at, let's say, 200 psi, my gun shoots at 260 feet per second. It goes up to 220. The gun now shoots at 300. If it goes down, or if I continue to increase the pressure to 240 psi, it drops back down again. So it's very important that when you own an autococker to realize that your autococker is going to hit a point based on how far you screw in your IVG or how far you screw in your adjustment nut. It's going to hit a point where whether you increase or decrease the pressure, your velocity will only go down. Once you're at this point, whether you increase pressure, your velocity goes down, or decrease pressure, your velocity goes down. This apex right here is what people consider the sweet spot. Now, this can move, and based on how far you screw in your IVG, this point can move. So if your IVG is backed all the way out, your gun may sweet spot at let's say 220 feet per second. You can screw this in all the way until it just about stops, and your gun may, or your sweet spot may end up being at 360 feet per second, and let's say 260 psi. So this point moves depending on how far you've screwed your gun in, based on your spring combination and everything. But it's very important to realize that sometimes when you're at the chronograph station, when you go to chronograph your gun, if it seems like whether you increase the pressure or decrease the pressure, your velocity goes down. That is called sweet spot. Many times, if you're at a low velocity and it seems like you're going one way or the other, you just need to turn your IVG up maybe about another turn and a half, then go back and start messing with the pressure again. But this has hung up more autococker owners than I could ever imagine, because they'll get their IVG. Their IVG is backed all the way out, so there's hardly any spring tension on the hammer when it goes and hits the poppet. And as they increase pressure, they can be at 140 psi and sweet spot at 200 feet per second. And as they try to go up to 160 psi, their velocity goes down. As they go down to 120 psi, their velocity goes down. So this is a very important concept to have to understand if you're going to be shooting an autococker. And it's also a very important concept to have when you're shooting other poppet guns such as egos and intimidators, because this happens to intimidator owners all the time and ego owners. They get a CP regulator, they back the nut all the way out, they shoot the pressure through the roof, and their velocity is 200 feet per second. They don't understand why. The reason why is they're on the front side of this curve here, and as they're increasing pressure, their velocity is just going down. Very, very important concept when you're dealing with poppet paintball guns. So now that we covered two of the most important concepts when owning an autococker, which is one, making sure that your gun is set up properly, that the gun fires first, then cocks second. So it fires first, then it cocks second. Okay, fires first, cocks second. That's a properly timed autococker. No problems at all. And we've talked about the bell curve, which trips up a lot of autococker owners, meaning that if you notice that whether you increase or decrease your pressure, your velocity goes down. That means you've hit the sweet spot. You may need to adjust your IVG accordingly. Now that we've talked about those two major issues, these two graphs here sum up probably 85% of all the issues that autococker owners have. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to get the camera up here closer. We're going to take apart this autococker. I'm going to show you how to take the valve out, how to take the pneumatics off, like if you're going to fit it for a pump kit, take the grip frame off, three-way and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and zoom in here, and I'm going to talk about all the different parts of the autococker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the different parts that are on the autococker so that you kind of understand what is going on with your gun. We'll start from the back. Typically off the back here, they'll have the little beaver tail that sticks up right here. It basically protects you as you're shooting your gun from this slamming into your mask. This is the cocking rod, which is sticking out of the back of the gun right here. Inside here is what they call the IVG, and the IVG is basically your adjustment to how much air is released from your valve every time you pull the trigger, okay? Then you obviously have your bolt. Right here you have your bolt pin, okay? Through the top here, this is the adjustment screw. This is where you adjust your gun on the second part, or I'm sorry, the first part of your firing sequence. Through the top here is where you adjust where this shoots, okay? If you screw this down, you slide this back. If you back it up, you move it forward in the stroke. So that's an important concept to remember when you're timing your autococker and you're adjusting your firing point. This little screw that goes to the top of the gun right here, if you screw this down, you move the firing point further back in the trigger pull. If you back this up, you move it forward. So that's a very important concept to understand. Then, of course, you've got the body right here, feed neck, detent. Then up here at the front, you have your ram, which is attached to your back block, which is when you shoot the gun, the ram cycles backwards, pulls the back block back. Okay? right here is your low pressure regulator. One of the easiest ways to adjust your low pressure regulator is what I do is as I shoot it, I use my hand and see how hard it is to push the back block forward as I hold the trigger back. So if this is rock hard and I can't touch this, chances are the low pressure regulator is turned up a little too high. Most of the time you can make this to where it's a little bit firm but not too hard. If this is hard as a rock and you can't move that forward, you could probably lower your low pressure regulator. Now some guns have the adjustment, some of them don't. Up here at the front, let me spin this around. This is what's called the three-way. Now, it's important if you're changing the pneumatics on your gun, depending on whether or not you have a hinge frame or a slide frame, hoses can be reversed here, okay? Sometimes based on how the hinge frame or slide frame is, you have to pay very close attention to how the hoses are arranged on here, depending on what kind of frame you have if you're building one from scratch. If you put your gun together and your back block stays back, okay, like this, as soon as you put air into it, chances are you have a hose reversed here and you need to swap your hoses on your ram. So, let's see what else we have here. Okay, obviously we have your trigger shoe here in the front, regulator, your reg port, and that's about it in terms of the external features of the autococker. So let's go ahead. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and take apart an autococker, and I'm going to show you basically how easy these guns are to take apart. You see a lot of similarities with these guns to spiders and stuff like that. There's actually a lot of similarities in the gun, how it's designed. It's got a poppet, just like, poppet, a valve poppet system, just like most of the guns that are on the market right now. Very easy gun to take apart. So let's go ahead and start with the back of the gun. Let's go ahead and remove the bolt pin, slide the bolt out. Let's go ahead and remove the cocking rod. And then now what we're going to go ahead and do, let's go ahead and remove the back block, get that out of here. And let's go ahead and also remove the cocking rod from the ram. Alright, that's off. Okay, now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and remove the grip frame. And the grip frame is very easy to remove. It's basically two screws to hold it on. The thing you need to pay attention to on the grip frame is that the grip frame is attached to the three-way. So what you need to do when you go to remove your grip frame is just go ahead and pull it away. So you want to make very sure that you're not yanking this anyway or anything like that. You don't want to damage your O-rings going into your three-way. So you just want to be really careful and just slide it up and away. Now we have the grip frame removed. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and remove the front block. Okay, now it's held in place by what they call the banjo bolt, which is just one major bolt holding the entire front block assembly in place. Now this is an important step, especially if you are looking to install a pump kit like from Wevo or PMP Industries or CCM or something like that. If you're looking to install a pump kit, this is actually where you install your pump kit. What you do is you screw it in there. This is where the handle goes and the cocking rod goes down the side. So now that we have the whole assembly here, you just go ahead and set this aside. Now this is the three-way O-rings and stuff like that. Now I usually recommend with the three-way to go ahead and lube these with a Dow 55. Usually you want a nice wear compensating thick O-ring type lube like Dow 55 on your O-rings here. I know a lot of people are, they say, well, you want your three-way to be as smooth as possible. Yeah, well, you also don't want it to leak. So definitely recommend gooping the hell out of this with Dow 55. It's just going to make this last a lot longer. And Dow 55 kind of has some wearing compensating, because as the O-ring expands and grinds itself down, the Dow 55 keeps it nice and supple. So we have the the front block removed, now what we can do is let's just go ahead and remove the ASA for the regulator. Get that out of there. Okay, so that's gone. And now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and start the process of removing the valve. The valve has a grub screw that holds it in place. Let's go ahead and remove that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and screw the caulking rod back into the gun because I need this to release the grub screw, or I'm sorry, the lug. There we go. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and loosen up the lug that's inside there. We're going to back that up so we can slide the hammer out of the back of the gun. Okay, let's go ahead and back up the IVG. And the IVG will fall out along with the spring, and out comes the hammer. Now, this is where you need the special Autococker valve removing tool in order to remove your valve. I think you can buy this at like Paintball Gateway. Is probably the cheapest place I can find it. Basically, it's an Allen key with a hole drilled in it to allow you to have the valve stem go inside here and for you to remove the locking nut. So let's go ahead and start removing that. I may need to get myself a pair of pliers here to loosen this up. All right. Got loosened up. And out comes everything out of the body. So we have the spring, we have the cup seal, the valve, and the retaining nut all comes out. So basically, as you see here, this goes, this little locking nut goes right inside here, and use the Autococker valve removal tool to remove that locking nut. There is no other way to get your valve out of an Autococker unless you purchase this tool. Very handy tool to have, especially if you want to swap this out to a high flow model or change to like a rat valve, 316 valve, or a rocket valve, or one of the many other Autococker valves that are out there to lower your pressure or increase your flow. That's about it. So we've completely taken apart the Autococker body. I'm not really going to take apart the grip frame. All grip frames are different depending on what kind that you have. There really are no serviceable parts inside of the grip frame. You can take it apart if you want to, but usually you're going to do more harm than good taking apart your grip frame. Very easy to lose the springs and get them disorientated and stuff like that. So usually I recommend don't take apart your grip frame unless you really know what you're doing. You don't really have to, but I'm not going to take apart this grip frame just because it works fine as it is, and usually when you take it apart, there's really no spring kits or anything that you can change out on it. Sometimes you can change the trigger out, but for the most part, the grip frame, you pretty much just want to leave it as it is. Okay, now that we have everything taken apart, that's about it for the Autococker. Very, very easy. So let's go ahead and start putting everything back together again. Probably the first thing I would start with is let's go ahead and put on the Let's go ahead and put the ASA back on the gun. Obviously, as you take these apart and use a million different Allen keys, I think I found the right one. Find the right hole here. Got it? All right. Okay, so you put that back onto the gun and tighten it down. Okay. Give this a nice torque. There we go. Now that's on there. Now what I always like to do is really goop this up with the Dow 55 for the three-way. That way to prevent any leaks. Clean it all out, make it look nice. And let's go ahead and put on the front block back onto the gun. Okay. Front blocks back onto the gun. Let's go ahead and use the Allen key to lock down the banjo bolt. Now, like I said, this is where, if you were to install a pump kit, this is how you remove your front pneumatics. So you just basically pull all this off the gun. The pump kit's going to have a rod that you stick down inside there. You basically attach your pump handle to that. attach it to the back block, and you're ready to go. I do have a pump kit on the way. I will be installing a pump kit on this gun, just so everybody can see how easy it is to install pump kits on these guns. Very, very easy. Okay, now that we have that in place, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and install the valve. What I'm going to do here is you need to kind of do a little bit of a balancing act when you're installing the valve. Usually put the spring on top, the retaining nut at the bottom. Now the bottom of the valve has a flat spot to it, and you need that flat spot to go face down so that that brass locking nut can secure it at the bottom. The valve is actually secured in two places. It's secured at the bottom using that brass nut, and it's secured from the back using that that big locking screw here that I have the Autococker valve removal tool attached to. So this is a little bit of this is probably the trickiest part of putting back together an Autococker, is making sure that spring stays perfectly straight up. Okay, what we do is slide that into the gun. All right, looks like we got it. I'll go ahead and just put this up there nice and snug. What I'm going to do is go ahead and lock this down first so that it doesn't spin on us. Definitely don't want this to spin. It'll choke the air off going to the gun. So I have to loosen this up just a little bit so I can get the locking nut back in there. There we go. Then I like to go ahead and take my pliers, give this a nice little twist, get it in there nice and snug. Now we can go ahead and pull this out. That comes out. Let's go ahead and finish tightening this up. All right. So we've got that in there properly. Okay. Now what we can do is we can put back in the hammer. You lube this up, but usually it doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of lube on the hammer. Now what you need to do is once you get the hammer in there, you're going to need to line the hammer up just right and go ahead and give it a couple turns so that it doesn't fall out of the back. There we go. Let's go ahead and put the spring in there. Let's go ahead and get the IVG. Put back in. Give this a couple turns. And it's always really important to remember where your settings were at before you completely take apart your Autococker. I believe I had this about 4 turns in from all the way back. So I put that back in, 4 turns in from all the way back. Looks like we got just about everything put back into place. So let's go ahead and put on the grip frame. And you need to be very careful that the grip frame, you don't want to really twist this that much. You don't really want your O-rings to be jumping out of your, you really don't want to stress your O-rings going into your 3-way. Believe me, those things leak enough as it is. Okay. So let's go ahead and put the grip frame back onto the gun. There's also, if you had a beaver tail and you were going to install a beaver tail on the gun, that's the hole where you install the beaver tail on the gun. There was a time when Autocockers were used in tournaments and they said it was mandatory to have a beaver tail so that people weren't thumbing the cocking rod to basically make their gun shoot a little bit higher. There's all sorts of cheats and stuff like that people used to do with their Autocockers. It's really funny. One of the funniest ones they used to do was, see the hole that's at the bottom here? What they would do is they would drill a small hole at the top and they would chrono with that one, which would chrono them at about 270. And when they get out there on the field, they'd spin the thing around. Kind of funny. All right. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and put back on the cocking rod. Now the cocking rod, I'm sure you can't see it on the camera, but there is a bend to it. You always want the bend up near the front of the gun, the straight part towards the back of the gun. So let's go ahead and screw this back on here. Okay, and what you're going to basically want to do is you're going to want about 2/3 of the threading sticking out of the back of the gun here, which we have here. Now I'm going to show you how, when we go to time the gun, how to set that up perfectly. But for right now, you just want about 2/3 of the threading sticking out of the back. So we have that. Let's go ahead and stick the bolt back into the gun. Put in the pin, cocking rod. Okay. Let's go ahead and screw on the regulator. These these are actually pretty good guns. These Psychoballistics Lightning or Supercocker guns or whatever the hell these things are called, they're junk out of the boxes. They're put together horribly, but actually once you have them all timed and shooting well, they're actually really good guns. They have a gauge port here so you can see what your input pressure is. They've also got a gauge port here at the bottom so that you can see what your cocking pressure is, which is really nice. Really, really nice. Looks like I might have had that timed pretty well right out of the box. All right, so now that we have this put back together again, let's go ahead and get some air, and I'm going to show you how the four-step way, courtesy of Ravi Chopra, I'm going to show you the four-step way of how to time an autococker. Okay, now that we've got some air into the gun, I'm going to show you the four-step way of timing an autococker. There's 4 steps, and if you do it like this, you'll become very, very good at timing autocockers. Very, very easy. And I got to give credit to Ravi Chopra. I believe I read an article and learned how to time my autocockers from him like back in the early 90s. He had a great article on how to time an autococker, and it's the 4-step process. And ever since I read that article, I've been timing my autocockers the same way ever since. First thing that you always do when you need to time an autococker is adjust the back block. This is step number 1. What you do is you want your back block to just barely be touching the body of the gun. Okay, so you don't want to tighten it down all the way. You don't want to back it out to where there's a gap. You want to have it to where it just barely touches the back of the gun. That's the best way to set up your back block, and that is step number 1 to timing the autococker. The second step, and I'm going to have to degas the gun, is adjusting your cocking rod. What the cocking rod is there for is to make sure that the bolt clears the chamber properly. So let's go ahead and degas the gun really quick. And luckily we got a nice bright white light here, and this is why I turned this on. What you want is when you pull the bolt back, when you pull the block back manually, you want it to click just when the bolt clears the breech. Let's see here. Yeah. So as you saw, as I pulled this back, the bolt cleared the breech right when you heard the click. All right. That's the perfect way to time it. If you have that screwed in too far, your bolt's not going to clear. If it's back too far, you're going to get 2 balls in the chamber. But you usually want your cocking rod to be adjusted just enough to where you hear it click right when it clears the breech. So you want it to click just like this. There you go. And it's cleared the breech. It's just a little bit sticking inside there, which is okay, but you want it to completely clear the breech before it clicks. That is the very important step number 2. The next step is where you actually start getting into the timing of the gun. So let me go ahead and turn this on here. Okay. The next step is just like when I showed you guys earlier. Okay, here's that graph, or that little chart that I had for you guys, showing you that as you pull the trigger, the first thing that should happen is the gun should fire first, cock second. Okay, so as we pull the trigger, the gun should fire first, then cock second. Let's see if this gun does that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger on one side and a finger on the other, and I'm going to check to see if the gun fires first, cocks second. It does. Okay, fires first, cocks second. All right. Now, if you have to adjust this part of your autococker, okay, if it fires too fast or fires way late, this is where you adjust your lug right here. And what you do is if you screw it down, so if you tighten it, you move the fire point further back in the trigger pull. If you back it out, you move it to the front of the trigger pull. So let me repeat that one more time. If you tighten your lug, okay, if you screw it down, you're going to move the activation point towards the back of the trigger pull. If you back it out, you're going to move it towards the front. So this blue thing here, if you tighten it, you're going to move it further back. If you back it out, you're going to move it further forward. You always want the fire to be about 1/3 of the way into the trigger pull, the cocking to be 2/3 of the way into the trigger pull. So if you adjust your lug, you're adjusting your fire point. The next thing that you adjust is the cocking mechanism, which is adjusted right here with the collar up here at the front with your three-way. You always want the cocking to take place after the gun fires, never before. You always want the cocking to take place towards the very back of the trigger pull. So as we see here with this gun, as I pull the trigger, I pull it very slowly. It should fire first, cock second. Fires first, cock second. If it does anything other than that, then I need to first adjust my firing point using my lug, and then the second thing I need to do is adjust my collar here. What you do is you basically unscrew the locking nut here, you spin it, and go back and try it again. It takes a little bit of practice, but once your gun is in time, usually it never goes out of time. So you always want it to fire first, cock second. Yep. There we go. And then once you have your settings set up, the next thing that I recommend you do with your autococker is to start shooting it fast, just like you would out there on the field. This is going to let you know if you have any lug slipping or anything like that. Okay, so I do have a little bit of lug slipping. So usually what you got to do then, that usually means when you have a little bit of lug slipping, that little bit of that burping, what that usually means is the lug is skipping over the sear. It's a very easy, very common problem. So usually what I do then is I move the firing point a little bit further back, just to make sure that the lug is far enough down for the sear to catch it. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. Now what I need to do is I need to use my cocking rod to find the lug. So you just move back and forth till I feel it drop into place, which it has. Let's go ahead and tighten it up just about 1/8 of a turn. You don't have to adjust this very much at all. We're talking about fractions of a millimeter can make such a difference in the stroke. Okay, so we go ahead and put the bolt back into place. You always got to cock these guns before you put air in them. Very important, or it'll just gush air out of the front. Okay, let's try it again. Let's make sure. Yeah, a little close. Okay. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and fast pull it, and let's make sure that it doesn't burp. All right, looks like we solved the problem there. So basically what was happening there was the firing stroke was too far to the front and the lug was jumping over the sear. So what I did was, by tightening it a little bit, I moved the fire block a little bit further back. My cocking block has always been towards, I always put my cocking all the way in the back of the trigger pull anyway. But my firing point was moved a little bit further back. Now the lug is further down, catching the sear every time. It's not skipping, it's not burping. The gun is cycling great. This autococker is timed. As long as I don't mess with it, it should never go out of time. All right. So as you guys just saw, we just completely took apart an autococker. You know, nothing to these guns. I mean, they're not, they're not as mysterious and not as crazy as a lot of people think they are. But they are tinkering type guns, which makes them a lot of fun. Also, at the same time, can make them a major pain in the ass. So I'm going to go ahead and recap the two most important lessons with an autococker. The first thing is obviously covering the graph, which is the sweet spotting graph. Okay, very, very important to realize that autocockers, as you increase the pressure, you're going to hit a point where the pressure is going to, whether you increase or decrease the pressure, the velocity is going to go down. That is called the sweet spot. Once you increase it, sometimes it's 200 psi, sometimes it's 250 psi. Every gun is different depending on where you put your IVG. So if you're at the chronograph and your autococker is just not getting up to speed, what you may want to do is back the pressure down a little bit, increase your IVG a little bit, then start increasing the pressure up again. Many, many times when people start having problems, they're on this side of it. They've overpressurized their autococker and they just cannot seem to figure out why the velocity is not doing what it should be doing. All right, and the next thing, of course, which I've talked about 1,000 times, but it's a very, very important lesson. As you pull the trigger on an autococker, the gun should fire first, cock second, okay? Fire first, cock second. Just like this gun, how we timed this gun, fires first, cock second. See that? Once you do that, autocockers are very easy guns to maintain. Very, very simple to set up. And once again, a big thank you to Ravi Chopra. I don't even know if the gentleman is involved in paintball anymore. Wrote a great article back a few years ago on how to properly time your autococker. Step 1, you adjust your back block to where it just barely touches the body. Step 2, you adjust your cocking rod so that as you pull this back block back manually, it cocks just as the bolt clears the breech. Step 3, you set your firing point using your IVG. Okay, I'm sorry, not your IVG, you use your lug. So if you tighten it, you move the activation point further back. If you loosen it, you move the activation point forward. That's step 3. Step 4, you adjust your firing point, I'm sorry, not your firing, your cocking point by adjusting your collar here in the front. So those are the 4 steps. Step 1, back block. Step 2, cocking rod. Step 3, firing point. Step 4, you adjust your 3-way, your adjustment collar right here. You do all those, you'll be a master at timing autocockers. The guns are going to shoot up. Now, I'm going to throw a quick conspiracy theory out there really quick about these lightnings, these psychoballistics lightnings, and I think also the Super Bolt. I'm pretty sure that these were made by the same OEM that made the die reflex. Okay, there's a lot of die in these guns. I'll show you something that's really cool. See this regulator on the front? This low pressure regulator? Okay, if you remember, this looks a lot like the regulator that came on the Generation 3 matrices back when die was making them. Remember that bullet regulator that stuck out of the front of the Generation 3 matrix? That looks a lot like that. These guns have a lot of die in them. Something else too that's really cool, and this is going to freak a lot of people out. People think, oh, you're full of shit. There's no way that's true. There's no way that's true. No way these $80 guns were made by the same people that made the die guns. Now watch this. Okay, I'm going to screw the barrel off here. Now this is a die ultralight barrel. Okay, hopefully you can see that. This is a die ultralight barrel. Okay, 692. Check this out. Mike's full of shit. There's no way. I don't believe him. Okay, this is the Psychoballistics front going into a die ultralight back. There it goes. See that? Seamless fit. Okay, let's see how close I can get that. Yeah, look at that. Seamless fit. Okay, the threading on the Psychoballistics is pretty much almost exactly the same. It threads right in. So these were made in the same factory as the die reflex. Remember that expensive die reflex, like $400 or $500 or $700 or something like that? The Lightnings and the Psychoballistics markers, the Super Bolt and the Lightning, were made in the same factory. So you can buy these guns right now for about like $60 to $70 right now on eBay, and believe me when I tell you, these are almost the same guns as the die Lightning or the die reflex. It's really, really cool, and I wanted to throw that out there, kind of like a conspiracy theory. I love making this shit up. It's awesome. So that's it for the Autococker show. Like I said, they're great tinkering guns. They're fun to play with, especially when you play rec ball. You don't want to shoot a lot of paint. Autococker's a great way to go. A lot of people are going to ask you, well, what's the difference between the hinge and the slide frame and this, that, and it's all personal preference. Personally, I like the slide frame a little better. It kind of gives that rustic, old school feel. Some people like the hinge frame a little better. It's easier to get on it. That's about it for the Autococker show, guys. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully this helps.